afternoon, everybody. Thank you for coming. So there's some overlap with what David just presented, but I'm going to do a little bit of a different focus here. First off, here is the list of our consortium members. And the way I like to think about the purpose of the R Consortium, after all, it's a kind of a trade organization where companies who realize that they have a commitment because they depend in their business on R, have the opportunity to participate in the R community. My hypothesis is that the community is in part so strong and vibrant because of the package subsystem. You know, by working on packages and developing them, people contribute to the community and they have the opportunity to have their contributions recognized. And this is a way that corporations can become first-class citizens of the community, and it helps, I hope, in part to offset the tragedy of the commons, where something is out there and it's difficult for people to contribute. But that's what we're about in the R Consortium. And this is what we look like by some of the numbers. So it's been about 3 years. We have distributed over $650,000 in that time to funded projects. So the money, we're doing pretty well at the ratio of money that we take in and give out. We give out a high proportion of the money that we take in users. There's 28 projects now. There are working groups. And you can see that we're sponsoring a lot of activity and reaching 40K plus people just through the working groups. A little bit of note on that. So I'm going to, the way we primarily distribute our financing is through the project call for papers. So twice a year, the ISC, the Technical Committee of the R Consortium, will put out a call for papers, and we look at proposals, they're voted on, and some are funded. What I'll show you in a little while is the results of the early, the call for 2018, the first call. Working groups have a little bit different focus. They may or may not be funded projects, but they're the opportunity for people to come together in an environment, sponsored by the R Consortium with some adult supervision and minimal resources for organizing, where they can come together and seek consensus. So especially difficult projects where there's no obvious answer and you have to get a place for people to agree on things, that's the idea of the working group. One particularly successful one that you'll see coming up and that David mentioned is the working group to launch the R Medicine Conference and the R Pharma Conferences, 2 conferences. The R Pharma people apparently saw great value in having an organization where highly competitive companies, pharmaceutical companies, loath to give up their secrets, were able to cooperate to produce something for the benefit of all. So these are new projects for 2018. Project that David mentioned, and of course what it's trying to do is provide a rational, standardized way to connect the databases, and this is a kind of project that's now in a continuous improvement, a maintenance mode or continuous improvement. So I think that we will continue funding this for as long as it needs to. We have a new project for infrastructure development, and I won't read all this to you here, but you can see it includes things like helping with Mac issues on homebrew, upgrading Windows, and the kinds of things that are under the covers and difficult for package developers. Tools and templates for teaching materials. We're trying to do what we can to sponsor as many different teaching and promotional activities as possible, and this one it looks like it's going to be promising. I should mention, if any of these things strike your fancy, please do reach out to the either directly to the people involved in the projects, or you can write to me and I'll put you in touch with the right people, because success depends on a high level of cooperation. This was a great surprise to me, and I'm looking forward to the results. So here you have a different group of people from the pharmaceutical people community reaching out to us in order to try to solve the issue of what a validated package means in the context of the pharmaceutical company. So they see the R Consortium as kind of like a standards body that can help, collaboration and adjudicate the issues. And in the end, they'll probably get some sort of repository, or they'll learn how to build, company-specific repositories that meet a certain standard. We have a project here for missing values. Now, this is interesting on both levels because it's a kind of an unsolved statistical problem, so it needs a lot of consensus both on, the subject matter, and it's also the kind of thing that needs collaboration in order to make all the mechanics and the websites and the literature that will be published possible. So it's a very important thing, and I think that I'm very happy that the consortium will be able to make what might be a fundamental contribution to statistics if this pans out the way we hope. There's a project to try to transfer knowledge. Many of the R code and the methods that were so popular that made R what it is in terms of a repository for statistical knowledge was done quite some time ago, as we've been talking about today. And while the old hands are still there to explain things in person, I think those of us interested should take some opportunity and try to talk to people and see why it was done, how it puts together, all those questions. Here's a working group that's a little bit out of the ordinary and also very exciting, because we have now the U.S. Census Bureau reaching out to us, actually, through the work of Ari Amstein, in order to try to promote the use of census data in statistical analysis. So we have an opportunity now to formalize or cement a relationship with the people who own a lot of data, and I'm very excited about that. Then we have this idea of top-level projects. Top-level projects are recognized as ongoing activities to which the R Consortium gives 3 years' worth of funding. So we have 3 of them working right now. This is the RUGS program, and I administer it. So what we're trying to do is fund as many R user groups and small conferences around the world as possible. We've got now something over 94 user groups. We've funded 10 small conferences, and the level of funding we can do for the conferences is on the neighborhood of $1,000. Not anything to speak of for a larger conference, but it helps get things going in parts of the world that are, where it's difficult to raise money. So I want people to continue, as best they can to support their own user groups, and when you travel and you come across people in parts of the world where maybe a user group there is none, or R is underrepresented, please tell them about this program, and maybe we can give them some funding to get started. Our Ladies has done an extraordinary job on so many levels, not the least of which is they're like superlative community organizers. They have such excitement and energy and spreading the word, and it's like they're missionaries all over the world now. I mean, it's just amazing. And while they're doing that, they're taking on very difficult issues like diversity and education and what have you. So it's nice to see, and it also speaks to the management and the leadership of the R Consortium itself, because it was funded, the consortium, to support R in terms of infrastructure. So we are taking a very liberal, I think, and enlightened viewpoint of what infrastructure actually is. Our hub is a project to make a build and testing system. This is like the real, hardware, heavy-duty idea of infrastructure. If you're building packages, try it out, use it. It's not perfect yet, but we need help, shaking it down. We could use help from people who know about build systems and makes and all that kind of stuff. So if you have any spare cycles, please think about an involvement, at least at the level of testing your own packages. And here are some of the working groups. I mentioned what they do. This is hard to read, but we have, an API, future-proof your native APIs for R. We have the code coverage going on. The distributed computing working group is still going, although it's not clear. The idea for that was is there a right way to write a API level of code for distributed computing in R? It's a very hard question, and it's an open. R certification is getting activity again, and the idea is, what would you want to certify? Originally, the certification project focused on things that were academic, maybe what you might find in a university curriculum. I think it's moving in the direction now of what would an employer like to see in terms of our certification. And that turns things maybe into the idea of, is there an industry level R administrator who is the liaison with the IT teams? We have these two the conferences, R in Medicine and R in Pharma. R in Pharma is going to happen in August. I think it's August 15th and 16th. It'll be at Harvard University. It's going to be a relatively small event this year because it's just the way the situation developed, and I believe it's all by, the conference is full already. But you can still sign up for R in Medicine, which will be held on September 7th and 8th at Yale. And there's some overlap, especially in the clinical trial space between those two conferences. And we have the diversity community going. And I mentioned the working group on census data. So in my last appeal here to you is to get involved. Now, if you're a company that or if you work for a company that has strongly financial enough, stability in order to participate as a member of the community, and that's $100,000 a year for the platinum level people are putting out. There are scales under that for gold and silver memberships, but anybody can get involved at the working group level. So if you see a project that is, you think personally interesting to you or has something to do with an important activity that's going on in your company, you can write to the people and gain participation and have some voice in things through the working groups. Now I have a few more minutes here. I'd like to take off my R Consortium hat and put on my R Studio hat and turn this full circle. So in Roger's talk today, somebody asked the question, does R Studio have too much power? And that's something that we're very sensitive to. So I'd like to give you a little history here. R Studio started off essentially as J.J. Allaire's coding project. I mean, he worked for a year by himself trying to do an IDE. He got so much done that he realized he couldn't do it all, and he called up his buddy Joe Chang and said, help me do this. So they worked on it for a couple of years, and they developed a coding habit. So they had to pay for their coding habit, and almost, in part, I guess, as an unintended consequence, there's a company that's now involved in churning out open source R code. About 70% of the engineering cycles at R Studio go towards open source activities. Now we get to the point in Roger's presentation where he had you know, as dot weakness, open paren, strength, close paren. So what happened is that our coding became a team, you know, developing for open source through our studio became a team effort. And it's hard, you know, teams, professional software teams are very productive. And I think that's what we see now, is that our studio is grinding out a lot of good stuff because through unintended circumstances that, you know, couldn't be foreseen and just being really lucky, we have an assemblage of people who are working on open source. Now I'll bring that back to here. Well, there may or may not be another group of people who can achieve that level of organization and success, and we would welcome that if that happens. But the R Consortium might represent a way for people to undertake projects that are bigger than package development. In fact, at the ISC, when we go out for this call for proposals, we're looking for things that are complex and meaty and that could affect a large portion of the art community. So it's a way that you can multiply your efforts if you can, and then we can provide you at least with a place to cooperate, and maybe if the idea is, you know, good enough and our budget is good for that year, we can give you substantial money to do it. So help make, you know, the R Consortium a valuable contributing member of the R community. Thank you.
So we're going to talk about a few of those projects in a moment. Maybe Nick and Julie can come up, and while they're getting set up, we could take a couple of questions as well.
Yes.
Hi, thank you. That was interesting. I'm curious about the R localization workshop. I have some friends who are not native speakers who are speak English at all who want to learn R and are struggling to find resources to do so. How is the working group addressing that? You know?
Well, I think the first thing that they're trying to do, you know, localization in the sense of providing foreign language support for, right? I don't think the group, it's very incipient at level right now. I mean, there's not a lot of, I'm not familiar so much with it, and it could use some more help in that regard. But there's also some overlap with the user groups around the world. So once we have, you know, once we have participation from say, people in Spanish-speaking countries, and there's a lot of activity now in South America, then we're beginning to see some effort to write blog posts and publish posts in foreign languages, which feeds into what that working group is doing. So if you're interested, you know, write to me and I'll get you in touch with the right people.
Not fluent enough in another language. Yes, thanks.
Sure.